It's supposed to last 2 weeks. So those of you who are aware of the tradition, it's supposed to last 2 weeks. And today it's supposed to be the birth of humans according to mythology. So happy birthday too. All right, now, the last 2 lessons were on the biology of human behavior. It can be quite dry and difficult to digest because you are looking at things that you can't really see. I sent you videos. I asked you to watch them so it's easier to understand. Now today we're going to do a recap. So we'll run through some of the things. And this recap is it's in the format of a class activity. Although, I wonder if we have enough people to do this. How many people are online? I think maybe online is still not too bad. Oh, that's a lot. That's enough. Because we definitely need, I've condensed it. I don't think everyone will turn up because it's just after New Year. So it's supposed to be 6 groups, but I'm going to switch it to 4 groups. But apparently, 4 groups is also a difficult thing in class. Although I think online shouldn't be a problem because then they have about 20 over people. Yep. Now, we're going to switch and look at, you will be some pictures that are important and you should remember them. Either you look at it from here or I have to project it. Can't do like preview shots. Maybe later we'll have a problem. Yeah. Zoom, is it Zoom? Okay. Okay, some important things will be the various parts of the brain. Of course, we are only looking at gross areas. If you have, some of you who have read Beyond, you might find that how come the brain is divided into 50 oval parts? As in just the surface area, and we are looking at very basic stuff. Now, those are already into the basics of what we are supposed to do in modern setting. What you're looking at is the foundational kind of stuff. All right? So if you are reading Beyond, no need to get so worked up over all the different separations. I'm not going to test you on so many parts. So in case you have read, I'm referring to Brodmann's area of how he mapped out the brain. All right, so there are 52 areas there and it's just the beginning. Of course, we have more parts. Now, we're going to look at only at 4 parts. Then some other important slides. This part, at least you should know. Huh? I'm not going to ask you like name the 3 parts, but this is like a given kind of thing. And then some of these. All right, so once we push into the inside of the brain, there are still gross areas. So these are some of them. All right. Now, so that about sums it all up. And here, the emotional brain. All right, I think I asked you to put a star there. So we are just simply running through the slide to have a quick visual recap of some of the places where you put the stars. And then, of course, this is a picture where it's more of a figurative picture than the previous one, but it still shows you the 4 lobes. So it's repeated. So it's important. Now, and finally, the specific areas that we're going to cover. So these are the parts, right? Okay, now, then we went through that was 2 weeks ago, or 3 weeks ago. Then 2 weeks ago, we looked at this. the actual building block of your behavior. So you should be familiar with the parts. And in the video you watch, especially this portion, if I use my mouse, I think online people, can you see the mouse? Can, right? Okay, so in the video, it introduced you to the whole thing plus the mechanism here. And just before we left off, I mentioned that infants, newborn infants, their synapses have no gaps, right? So if one neuron fires off, you can bet your money that the next neuron will also fire off. Of course, not all the neurons will fire because there is only so much the electrical energy can travel. Or I should say there's only so far it can travel. But it will still beat, meaning it will travel a longer distance if you standardize the size between an adult and an infant. The child's neural firing will still travel further because there are no gaps, which means there is no energy loss, there's no exchange, nothing. So one fire, it will send all the way down, resulting in the infant will be very sensitive to react. That's why infants will cry easily when they are disturbed. But they also have limited variety of behaviors because it is the gaps that make it possible for us to display different kinds of behaviors, right? So keep that in mind. Most books don't tell you this. So it's kind of confusing, and people look at infants and they look at adults, they cannot understand why, at least there are many reasons behind it. So one of the reasons why infants, they are not miniaturized adults. They really have a brain of their own. Even when they grow until toddlerhood, middle childhood, their brain structures are actually very different. They look the same once you open up the skull, but the inner workings are actually quite different. So we need to teach children in different ways. Not like they don't learn things exactly like adults, okay? Now, it is beyond the syllabus here for me to emphasize the how we reach out to adults and children, behaviorally speaking. The general things we will still cover, like whether you are young or old, you will respond to reinforcement. So that's coming up 2 lessons from now. Okay? All right, now that we have seen all the pictures again, and I hope you have watched the video and noticed this part. I remember asking you to watch the video plus pay attention to the electrical signaling graph at the side, right? Okay, now that's theory. We're gonna do an exercise, we're gonna discuss something, and I'm gonna base it on another food substance, so it's easier for you to understand. Now, there was a class activity I mentioned, which we are supposed to do, and it has some bearing on decision making and the way your neuron works and how it's affected by food. So we are going to do learning and some bits of cognitive psychology 3 lessons from now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that class activity to Dan because it's linked to decision making. And I have put up something that you can participate into today. And it's something that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. All right, so let's go into that. So like I mentioned, throughout all the 9 lessons, I will actually be linking back to all these neuron things. In the past, we didn't do that, but people say that these 2 chapters are very difficult to digest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to space it up, and we're going to put in class discussions, but then you'll find that the class activity will be geared towards all this neurology and biology of behavior. Okay, can't have the best of both worlds. Last time they will discuss something else. So this time around, we'll try and see if this makes it easier for you to capture all this stuff. Let's begin with this. All right. Now, before we begin, I'm going to emphasize that because we are going to talk about food and the brain and your nervous system and maybe your decision. So obviously, there will be some talk into dietetics and maybe anatomy and physiology. It's unavoidable. But I don't want you to focus too much on these medical, anatomy, and physiological concepts when you do your discussion. Initially, you have to discuss maybe the pros and cons of this kind of stuff. But ultimately, remember, it links to behavior and decision making. All right? Now, look at the question here. Suppose you are tired. All right, I will break you into your discussion group shortly, but let's deal with this broad thing first. Suppose you feel tired. I think that's not difficult to understand, right? Yeah, and for some of us, the neural mood is still around, for me. So what do we do to perk ourselves up when we have to take on a task, do some chores, you know? What can you do? So this part, just free response. No need to discuss commonsensical answers. All right? Online people, I'll come back to you shortly. Okay? Let's do this for the class. It's faster. What can we do? Perk yourself up using what? Tea. Using coffee, you drink lots of tea. What else? Sleep more, take hot, cold shower? Or both? Or you play around with the temperature, cold and hot, cold and hot. Okay, fine.
Listen to music, Mr. Lam.
Depends on what music you listen to. Yeah. I can play a lullaby. But yes, if you play loud, stimulating music, that will work. We will talk about that in perception, all right, later on. So somebody said something? That's a double-edged sword, okay? Jumping jack, well done. All right, so we roughly have these kind of things, right? And most people's solution is actually to drink coffee instead of getting sufficient sleep or doing jumping jack. Okay? Although that too, those two, right? Sleeping sufficiently, doing jumping jack, it will be a better option. As for doing regular exercise, this is a long-term thing. Some people, they don't like to be tired all the time, so they start to change their metabolic rate, okay, by doing regular exercise. So these are things like they plan ahead. Now, let's focus on drinking coffee. Most people use coffee. What is the general explanation why coffee works? Yeah, it's not the coffee, it's a substance within the coffee, which is the caffeine, all right? And caffeine belongs to a class of actually some kind of plant chemicals, methylxanthine. It's a big class, and caffeine is one of those methylxanthine. So if you, and then of course the commercial sector is trying to sell you a lot of those xanthine materials. They'll tell you everything good about it. But you've already encountered a few bullshits as I've debunked them, right? So now since caffeine is part of those xanthine thing, it's highly, they drum up the sales pitch. But is it really that good? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna break into 4 groups. And each group will just deal with one topic. Now listen to this first. What the instruction is like is this. Oh, probably will need your help to move them around shortly. So it goes like this. We are going to be grouped into 4 groups. So over here we have about, do we have 12 people? 3, 6, almost. Maybe you can join them. Oh my God, don't arrow me. Okay, now, so we have 4 groups. Let's call it A, B, C, D, E, right? A, B, C, D. So if we have 12 people here, you will have 3 people in one group, correct? Then that is actually not enough for this, but don't worry, you just cover as many of the questions as possible. So A will cover, for example, how much coffee should be drunk per day. And then how long does the caffeine work? So you discuss, and maybe use your phone, search for the info, all right? You split the work up. So most of you will be able to get details of the first part. Then B group will be doing what are some benefits from coffee, all right, other than just being perked up. Now, so A, B, C, you will focus into your so-called expert topic, correct? Now we'll do that for 10 minutes. Then each group has 3 people over here. So later on, you find that A1, B1, and C1, they will come together and form something called the jigsaw group. So each of you will bring your expert, what you found out, your expert information, and you discuss so that you can decide, is coffee a useful thing to use? And will you continue to do so, or will you change the way you use coffee? All right, got it? So we split the work in the expert group first. And then since you are not going to find out everything for yourself about it, you need to rely on your group mates later on in the jigsaw group. Then you share the information before you can come to a decision. Keep in mind, each jigsaw group, the members in each jigsaw group need not always come to the same conclusion. Okay? Some people may be more tolerant of certain information, some people less, but you need to share the information. Okay? Unless you're already an expert in this field, then of course you just spill the beans and tell everybody, listen to me. Or else, please participate. Same thing, but yeah, we split them into 4 groups. Okay. Later we'll figure out about the jigsaw. Okay, now, for all of you here, just split into one of the, you don't have enough people, so I think what you can do is, because if it's two people and 3 people, it's gray area. In one group, you could find that it's going to be difficult. Well, let's try 3 people in a group. There will be one group that has 1 participant less. And tell you all the things right. Can. Okay. So you ready? Just split your group. I will look for the one with two members in the team, and I will just join in. No, I won't shoot you the arrow. You can focus on that. So there are 10 minutes. So 10 minutes, 10 minutes for the discussion, all right? Yep. Are you grouped now? Yeah. Okay, so once for the group inside, they are listed 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's not a problem here. So let's do, from here we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? So which group is Louis, the back, 2 of you all? Okay, I join in. So your I will shut up actually. Okay, now so side effects. So then there's more to say, right? I will contribute 1 side effect. Yeah, please.
They won't have access to this, so maybe they should take
Oh, yeah, if we can't send it to them. How did...
Oh, they have the slides.
They have... No, not this one. I didn't want them to refer to this. Somebody did something that they... Yeah, let's just... Okay, online people, can they hear? I don't have to go close to this, right? So online people, please take a snapshot of this questions. I didn't send it to you initially because I didn't want you all to be doing the class activity ahead of time. Otherwise, someone will become a super duper expert and then there will be no discussion. Yeah. Okay, the time is up. Now, but we're not done yet. So right now, you should have plenty of information about the topic question that you were discussing. All right, it's time to share with your friends. So you are not going to move around, and then you form up a group. So each of you will bring in information pertaining to your topic question. And now, what I like to highlight is this. Hang on, let me move the window away. After this discussion, this next slide of discussion, we're not immediately going to listen to, no, we should. We're going to listen to, maybe we probably only have time for 2 or 3 people to share. So it will not be everyone, but I'd like you to still form your own decision about whether you're going to if you're already a regular coffee drinker, are you still going to stick to the same thing? Or you feel that, maybe there is a need to change my lifestyle, change the way I deal with coffee. Now, I will have more to say about this later. So back to the focus. The questions are there. There's no grouping for the question. You are going to deal with both questions. So after you've shared the info, you have more info now. All right, digest the info a little bit and consider the two questions. All right, then we will finish up with the recap. Okay? All right, now for all of you here, it's simple. Just move around and make sure that your team, you are now facing different people. All right, each dealing with just now all those various questions. Those people who dealt with this. Okay? For online, yeah, I think. Okay, online people, there are a lot of you, and there were actually several people. We didn't make it like 4 in a group. So what happened is we will just reshuffle. I'm sure each group, right, will still end up with various experts. So it's not a problem. Yeah, rather than you manually slot them, just do a one-shot reshuffle.
How long?
10 minutes to. In class people, I'm sure you're going to finish this much faster than the online people because each of their group has more people, so more things to share. Okay, but don't worry. Once you're done, then you just go downstairs, get a cup of coffee, up lor. Yes, please. And online people, please take a photo of that question you're supposed to discuss because when you're in your breakout room, you may not be able to see the screen. Okay? Yeah. Apparently, there are still discussion going on, and I thought the online people would take longer. Okay. Oh, serious discussion back there. Huh? Not done? Almost. All right, let's. Maybe what we do is we hear it from any one person from here and one person from online. After you have gotten all the information, would you actually change your habit with this very trivial thing called drinking coffee? Okay? Anyone from class first? Would you not? And what are your reasons for it? Okay. Sorry, I haven't gotten your name. You are
Sunny.
Sunny.
Sunny, S-U-N-N-Y.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Then you don't need coffee.
For me, I used to drink coffee, but it's not like everyday kind of thing. It's only when I feel like it, then I drink it. But then when my group was looking at the benefit, then we realized that wow, it was so
Power.
benefit, no? Wow, 10, 15, 20 benefit. So we were like, wow, maybe at the point of time I was like, wow, I think I should start drinking coffee. But when the next group that we getting the what you call this
Shared information, like the side effects.
Yeah, the side effect. Then it made me decided that I think we should just moderate.
Right.
Only drink when you need it. Yeah.
Which brings us to a question. If we want to moderate, how much moderation should we do? Is it going to be a daily, no longer a daily basis that we drink? Or we still drink daily but cut down on the amount, right? So there are still ways to talk about it. Now keep that in mind because it's going to come back in the discussion. Okay, good. So online people, I'm not sure whether you can hear Sunny. Well, what he was saying is that he was first brought by the benefits of drinking coffee. Then later on in the discussion, he further found out that coffee has considerable side effects too. So in the end, his decision initially gearing towards, oh, maybe I should up my drinking. Now it's back to, okay, I should drink in moderation. All right? And that's why you heard me say about the gray area about moderation. Now, what about someone from online? Can someone from online share your, your insights? Anyone? Or should I just point out someone? Yes, I should point out someone. That's what Angel is nodding, but I think you've contributed before. So today it's not going to be you. Let's look at someone beside you. Yes, and she was going like, yes. Tai Ming Ming. Yeah, next time don't sit beside Angel, okay? Yeah, that name.
My answers might not. Can you hear me clearly first?
And,
Okay, that's great. So my answers might not be really addressing the points here because for the sessions that I've discussed in majority of us, coffee doesn't really work for us.
okay.
So yes, I mean, if it doesn't work for us, then we might not necessarily need coffee, right? But we've also heard like for some people, coffee do work for them. And then there are also some where coffee is just like a lifestyle. It's like a time for them to sit down with their family members, to just spend time, to connect with them or to chit chat with them. So not really answering your first question.
Casual
I'm so
drinker.
sorry. But we also heard about some side effects, like you can get all shivery or like maybe it makes your heart beat slightly faster, or you feel that wave of energy right at the start, but after that, you kind of feel drained or even more tired than before. So we also mentioned like, I mean, for those people where coffee works for them, we did mention like, good for them, like it works. But, you also have to bear in mind, do you have any like underlying health conditions? Because there are certain groups of people, or there are certain people who are not recommended for coffee intake.
It's true. You have mentioned all the so-called pointers for making a decision. And as you said, you are a casual drinker yourself, partly because coffee doesn't really work on you. Now, but would you consider changing your casual drinking habit by even a little bit?
You mean to reduce or to increase?
Yeah, any kind of change is acceptable, but would you actually, let's say it's not too troublesome, but would you, in this case, would you actually change your coffee drinking style or habit, or what some people call it? Yeah, would you do it yourself?
I actually wouldn't, because it's not part of my lifestyle. That's the first thing, right? So, and I don't see the benefits for me in it, so I wouldn't. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Now, so 2 for your no change, 0 for coffee, poor coffee, losing out. Anyway, before we move on to the next part, now let's just do a quick vote. How many people actually feel that coffee gives you more energy? So whether you have drank coffee before or you've seen it, I'm not just saying it's your experience. How many of you actually feel that, yes, coffee in general gives people more energy? Show of hands again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Voting online, how many people there? How do we... There used to be a screen, right? Or is it this one? I just need to click it on.
Yeah, 6 people raised their hands.
Oh, okay. I see 6. 7 hands raised on online. Oh, the percentage is more. All right, because what we have is almost 45% of the people here raise their hands. Online, we have almost 25 people. Yeah, but only 7 people. So about almost 25-30%. 9 people raise their hands now. Okay, more or less the same already. Okay. So generally, we can safely say that if this is projected to the public, about half the people would say that, yeah, coffee is an energy giver. But is it really? How does it really work? Now, let's look at its impact on the nervous system. So this will form part of your discussion. Let's go to, I click this, right? All right, this is a picture that you are familiar with. All right. So I simply rip it off online, because I can't draw it here. If I draw it on the whiteboard, the online people won't be able to see it. So now you're familiar with this. We have, let me move this over. All right, this is your typical neuron that you've learned before. And here's your nucleus, the dendrites, the axon, and the the terminal buttons. The terminal button is actually more specifically this three, in this case, this three bulging thing. All right. So the the axon terminal, that's this whole thing. Now, if we enlarge it, all right, you will see that near the end and where there's connection, it's at the dendrites, right? You have, so this thing, all these are receptors that you've learned before. Now, in other words, how the cell communicates according to the video you watch is by what? The signal is passed across the synaptic gap, right? The synaptic cleft, the technical term, the gap. And the chemical will have to merge with some receptors. Now, you probably remember something called all or none principle from the video or from your notes. All molecules have a certain unique shape. And the receptors evolve in such a way where they will cater to this unique shape. So for example, if a molecule is shaped like in this fish shape, and the receptor can actually make use of this only if the receptor has evolved a shape to fit. This like lock and key principle. Got it? So if the receptor is like round, and then this molecule, it doesn't fit, nothing will happen. No signaling will occur. It has to fit. Now, you probably remember I actually mentioned before the universal energy currency in the cell, right? The adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate, if you don't remember, go watch the first video. You'll see that little yellow thing there, merge with the cell, and then the cell protein will move, right? So that yellow thing is actually a combination of molecules. One of the component is this thing called adenosine. So what is really happening in your body, like why you feel tired, especially after a day's work, and you don't feel so tired after you've woken up from a good sleep. So it's not always night sleep, but if you have slept enough, you wake up, you feel a bit more refreshed. Why? Now remember, this adenosine triphosphate is universal currency, meaning it's used to help you stay awake, do all the work, right? But once you've worked, it will break down. So it's like this, there's the molecule comes in, so pretend this is an analogy for ATP. It comes in, it works, then it breaks up. As it breaks up, energy is transmitted, used. One of the waste product is adenosine, right? As adenosine builds up in your blood vessels and everywhere around the cells, because they are used up, they become a signaling chemical. So your neuron, they evolve to have receptors to measure the amount of adenosine. But remember, you are not a robot. So how your body tells you the amount of adenosine build up, the waste product build up, is this thing called tiredness. So you feel tired because of adenosine, at least this is one of the reasons, because of adenosine build up. Now you can understand, we can try to understand caffeine. Caffeine is a molecule that is similar but not identical to adenosine. So here you notice that the caffeine is drawn in a what do you call this? Maybe a trapezoid frustrum kind of shape. Whereas the adenosine molecule is like a diamond shape, right? Now what happened is, with 1/3 of the shape similar to the adenosine, it's actually able to fit partially into the receptor. Okay, so when adenosine builds up, right, and a lot of them can actually merge with your receptor, it will send a signal. So this neuron, so when adenosine hits this, small electric current produced. So when there's a lot of adenosine around this, the cell will get the idea and you will know that, okay, I should signal tiredness. So it sends a signal down to the rest of the cell. But when caffeine comes to the receptor, because it's very similar, it will go in, but it's unable to turn the lock. It can't unlock it. It's not identical. But it will take up the space of the adenosine. So now there's a lot of adenosine floating around, but they can't do their job to signal tiredness. So, question, Do you think caffeine gives you energy? It gives you the illusion of energy, right? So if you are tired but you force yourself to work, what might happen to you? Yeah, but the breakdown is not so obvious. Of course, once you stop it, you find that, oh, there's a lot of problem because now there's a lot of adenosine build up, right? They never fit in, your body never removed the byproduct, it's just building up there. Over time, when you are always working beyond your level, what's going to happen to your immunity? It drops. So muscle tissue repair, organs repair, everything is kept low because of coffee. All right? So now, with this information, now you know that, oh, it's just an illusion. Do we still believe that coffee gives us energy? No, it only warps the signal. All right? The good news is, luckily, your body can adapt. So it knows this is a bad thing. But then some people like coffee. They keep drinking it. So the body adapts by what? By growing more receptors. This is a process called, what's my marker? So you might have read this about how behaviors are controlled. It's called upregulation. Maybe you can key in for me, please. The word is upregulation. That. So in order to cope with your behavior, your body won't complain. Your body tries to cooperate. It always does that first. It grows more receptors to make sure that the built-up adenosine doesn't poison you. That's why afterwards, right, you find that some coffee, well, previously, right, you drank some coffee, you felt more perked up, but now with enough receptors or more than enough receptors, the adenosine can still provide the signal. You still feel tired with that same amount of coffee. You need to drink more now. So who is really in charge of your behavior? The coffee or you? So sad, right? Now you know you are actually a slave to coffee. And people fight for their freedom and free will. They didn't know the most insidious is not Darth Vader. It's just coffee. All right?
I think either almost the same as smoking and
Yes.
taking drugs. It's also
Yeah.
an illusion.
That's why especially for heroin is the fastest. So usually in 6 months' time, all the heroin addicts would have to max out the amount that they can tolerate. What I meant by max out is that by then they are ingesting an amount to hit the high, right? But the liver already cannot take that kind of torture. So the whole body will break down and they will die. Or the metabolic rate will become messed up, they will suddenly shrink and then they will lose energy and they keep in jittery all the time. And when they try to stop, the same with coffee, you find that coffee's impact is not that much. If you stop, you only go into what Louis mentioned just now, like crash. Like you feel more tired and such things. Or you feel that you can't concentrate. But for heroin, because the change is very big, very huge, so some people actually, they jitter, they cannot control their muscle movements. Some of them even feel like, why is there like, I'm being electrocuted? So there's tingling sensation like electricity running all over. Because now there's so much receptors all over the neurons, the neurons are just happily firing another signal because they are starved for the need or to neutralize the receptors. So once no heroin goes in, the receptors just go haywire. Okay? So that's how bad it can be. It's just that coffee doesn't reach that extent. Yeah.
How about like we were talking about Coke? She says she don't take coffee, but she drinks Coke. So does Coke contain caffeine?
Yes. In the past, now Coca-Cola actually tries to reduce that. Haven't totally cut it. It's still there. Okay, and up to the 80s, it was just happily pumping more and more caffeine into Coca-Cola. Then with the research coming in, they don't want to eventually end up like the cigarette companies have to pay millions of dollars, no, billions of dollars. Yeah, they took it out. So sometimes they still sell you the caffeinated Coca-Cola, and some actually comes with what? Non-caffeinated Coca-Cola, right? Just to be safe. So you cannot sue them anymore. Too late. Want to earn big bucks, must be born earlier. Tea generally, depending on what brand you drink, what type you drink, tea generally contains about, for the same quantity, right? It contains about 25 times less caffeine. So with that low amount, and I'm talking about only red tea, it's unlikely to have such a bad impact. So people will feel safer with red tea, but for some teas, they actually don't have caffeine. So like white tea, then it's okay, all right?
Mr. Lam,
Yeah.
I have a quick question. Like some people when they drink caffeine, or like for me, I also get my mind cannot stop moving and you get heart palpitation. Is it because of your firing of your neurons?
Yes, but that's because you are genetically predisposed to be activated. There is a small group of people who have increased heart rate because it's not just your central nervous system, which part? Central nervous system equals what? Recap. Spinal cord and the brain. Caffeine actually works everywhere in your body as long as there's receptor for it. When it reaches the heart, it will actually cause it to pump faster. But the impact is felt differently in different people because some people who are more sensitive, they already have a predisposing genetic effect to be more reactive to to caffeine. So in that case, they drink a bit only, their heart will move very quickly. These kind of people, you're not suitable to drink caffeinated products. Because why? Now, when the caffeine reaches your blood vessels, reaches your kidney, of course it makes your kidney overwork, but it also, and the kidney and the blood vessels, they actually tighten their spaces a bit. So it leads to increased blood pressure and fluid pressure in you. So prolonged exposure to high amounts of caffeine would mean, all the studies show that once you take about 4 to about 8 cups of coffee, depending on what you drink, what type you drink, you're going to clock right after about 1-2 years of almost daily usage. Your blood pressure compared to control group is about 10 points higher. So if our normal blood pressure is 120/70, all right, maybe you are 30, 40 years old, you're supposed to be 120/70, you are now clocking 130/90. And that puts you in the range of high blood pressure already, which means there is already damaging impact on your blood vessels at a very young age. All right. Now, but before we go on to all this, let me finish up. Body can adapt. So all that you have learned about behavior, it's not only operating at your conscious level, at your unconscious level, your body adapts, right? So your body will start to adjust itself. Most of the time for average human, in about 2 months, the neurons will adjust themselves so that they bring down the unwanted effects of coffee. So you find that it's no longer so damaging on your kidneys. It's no longer so damaging on blood vessels is another story. That one seems to be prolonged one. Cannot really, once you drink too much, it doesn't seem to come down. But the impact on the heart, the impact on the kidneys, it comes down. So then people feel safer drinking. Now, let's come back to psychology, behavior. If you insist that you want to enjoy coffee, you still want to make use of its energizing, right, inverted commas, energizing effect, what are some adjustments that we can make to our coffee drinking lifestyle? What do you think? Moderate in what sense now? We're back to that question, right?
Like I'm a coffee drinker.
Uh-huh.
Every time I order coffee, even at the coffee shop, I drink up. Then the coffee shop thing waste money.
Better waste money than waste life, right?
I cut half lah. Instead, so instead of average 3 per day, maybe
Yeah.
3/4.
Okay.
He always ask why no good days.
Okay, good. So one way to moderate is to cut down on the amount. What is another way? Decaffeinated is similar, like he drinks less because then he consumes lesser amount of caffeine. Decaffeinated is you take the product, you get the taste, but you already get less. What is another way of regulating the intake of caffeine? Drink with? Ice cafe is the same. The ice will not change the amount of caffeine. If your original caffeine is like 75 milligrams for a 200 ml cup, you put ice, it will still be the same amount of caffeine going in.
But the effect is not the same. What and all is not the same.
It's just on your tongue. You feel shook, not shook. That's it. the chemical substance will still go into your bloodstream and into your nervous system.
I think my real case that I'm a substitute. That means I still have the gain. Yeah, ordering coffee. Okay.
They all. So another way of moderating is that we use a substitution product, right? So now we have two things. We adjust the amount, directly adjust the amount consumed. We occasionally swap in with substitution. A third way is that some people, they decide that they decided to cut down by what? By only using caffeinated products on important days, like extra long work days. And for athletes, right? Because now it has been shown that you cannot take steroids, but you can take coffee. So on competition day, they drink, actually the day before, they will start to drink coffee. And they don't do it all the time because they want to maintain that sensitivity. They don't want it to be removed. So they train without coffee, then competition day, right? 2-3 days before, wow, I was about to say hamtam. Okay, never mind, sorry, it's English. They suddenly consume lots and lots of coffee. Right? So that is another way. In other words, by understanding how something works on you, you now take back control of the decision of how you're going to lead your lifestyle. So that brings back to psychology, correct? Now, other things about why we shouldn't reject is that it's all very new. You probably that is not agreed upon yet. Apparently, some amounts of coffee can reduce or even prevent Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease. But I want to give a strong warning. This part of the research is not cast in stone yet. The research is very new. So experts in the community hasn't come to the conclusion that it really will help. More testing is needed. Moreover, the impact seems to be short term. We still don't know whether Parkinson's and Alzheimer's will return in the future. All right? So don't go out and argue about this. It's just way too new. You just have to wait for probably another 20 years. Of course, if you are concerned, then caffeinated products, maybe it has such an effect. What you can do is you adjust it. They usually tell you, okay, drink about 6 cups max. The cup is referring to about 200 to 250 mils. But what is really important is the amount. Now, all right, if you go look for instant coffee, some instant coffee, they actually, pure coffee, Arabica beans coffee, you won't know until you send the beans for lab tests. But for instant coffee, it's more regulated commercially. So you can, for some brands, they actually list down how much you are taking in. But it's a very wide range because they use different products. So usually 1 cup will be ranging anywhere between 30 milligrams to 70, 80 milligrams of caffeine per cup. So if you keep to about 200, 250, you should hit the effect, the useful effects, without overloading your body. That works out to be, depending on what you drink, about 2 to 4 cups, all right, on a daily basis. But if you still want to have that perk, then you wouldn't be drinking every day. You might still be drinking that amount, but every other day. So adjustments on your own, right? So next time people tell you, hey, drink this, I've got energy, don't be fooled, all right? And how much to do it on a safe level, now you can decide, all right? So that's what psychology does. It gives you back the autonomy to decide, all right, what's good, what's not so good for yourself. Question? Yeah. Come again? Yes. But it takes time. Typically, at least 1 to 2 weeks of stopping the coffee, then this part will drop significantly. But that means if you stop for about 1 to 2 weeks, depending on different people, because the genes play a part, then you find that, hey, you need that original amount of coffee. The original amount of coffee will give you that amount of perk. Okay? But there's one thing gray here is that we haven't done any study on people who deliberately drink to perk up, and then they taper off for 2 weeks, and they perk up again. Whether this sudden increase, because for athletes, right, they can stop drinking for 2-3 months. They don't compete all the time. But if you are thinking of, I want to reverse my body within two weeks, then I perk up again, and then 2 weeks. Now that we don't know whether a sudden increase in receptors, and then sudden drop, sudden increase, sudden drop, whether that will have long-term side effects. Okay? Question? Now, I hope this recap, you are now better able to understand these things. So we go to the last bit of the slide, some important neurotransmitters. Oh yeah. So generally, this is a slide, it's in lesson 3, near the end part. We didn't come to this part last time. So there are certain neurotransmitters which they are not called caffeine. It has been identified, and they also will increase or decrease the signaling, all right, to achieve a change in behavior. So adrenaline, I'm sure most of you know about this, adrenaline is the more active form of noradrenaline. Your body produces both, though adrenaline in lesser quantity. So most people are acquainted with this. And indeed, the one in bracket is actually the chemical name. Some people tend to use epinephrine for this neurotransmitter in the brain, and use the term adrenaline for this neurotransmitter in the rest of the body. But the truth is actually back in the 60s, when one of the pharmaceuticals developed a synthetic form of adrenaline, they literally called that drug adrenaline. So after that, the scientists, right, they don't like to be too associated with commercial stuff. They started switching to its chemical name. So right now, you find that we use both. Okay? Now, so adrenaline as a neurotransmitter, it works by what? By literally making you feel more what? More aroused. So it has the same like energy-giving properties of caffeine. It increases, all right, it doesn't give you energy, but it increases your physiological arousal and function. Okay, now, this thing was acetylcholine was the first neurotransmitter to be discovered back in the 50s. That was back in the 50s. This thing, it helps you build memories. So Alzheimer's disease people, the parts of the brain that produces acetylcholine, it dies. So they are no longer able to produce acetylcholine, their memory suffers. Caffeine works to modify this signal. Why? Because acetylcholine is not only for making sure that your memory is formed, it also stimulates certain parts of the brain to increase your attention span and concentration level. So once you have a lot of this, or you are working at enough levels of this, you find that you can learn anything. A lot of people say, cannot, I'm old already. I think it was this class, right? We mentioned something about beliefs. Some people tell themselves, I cannot, then they really cannot. I think it was the lesson on placebo. So back on this thing, when you have enough acetylcholine, it pushes the concentration and attention up. When it reaches a high enough level, you find that you can be old, but you will still be able to learn a lot of things that people tell themselves they can't. And caffeine actually increases, all right, it is not very clear whether caffeine actually increases the production of acetylcholine, but it works together with acetylcholine to further stimulate the brain, and therefore leading to better memory, better concentration. So when you are learning something, all right, just before you start to learn, drink coffee. Okay? So that is one of the perks. This part, I don't need you to put a star there. This recipe is to tell you that there are also other neurotransmitters that are not necessarily produced in your body, but it can be synthetically made and then pumped into your body, maybe in the format of a medicine, and it will work to to adjust certain outcomes. Usually risperidone is used to what? It's meant to work as a relaxant. All right, so it's used by doctors, but it can also be used to what? To modify the behavior a little bit. All right, because remember your behaviors are all triggered because of either stimulating or inhibiting. So when this changes the signal, it will change the signaling, the overall signaling, thereby leading to differences in behavior.
Quick question.
Yep.
For people with like clinical depression, obviously it's a chemical in their
Yep.
brain. So the medication helps to rebuild like the
It doesn't rebuild. It gives. Okay, what? Thank you. For tip of tongue. It's still New Year mood. What Stephanie said was this chemical called serotonin. And please note it down. So this thing, most people read it as it's a mood neurotransmitter. Yes, it is, but what it does is, in very low amounts, it will trigger the behavior of depression. Why? Because at adequate levels, serotonin adjusts your feelings of mood. It lets you feel a sense of contentment and bliss. So a lot of people think, oh, this is the relaxing neurotransmitter. It's not. What it does is, when it's produced and passed to various parts of your brain in adequate amounts, it will give you the sensation of bliss and contentment. But why it happens is because over time, right, when in ancient past, primitive animals and humans, when they do something like eating and they feel contented, this feeling led to somehow, right, we wouldn't discuss beyond this, but it led to the production of serotonin. Over time, the brain cells register it as what? When there's serotonin, you feel contentment and bliss. And therefore, other associated moods will be what? Just feel calm and relaxed. So in depression, what they do is they try to make the person feel calm by giving them more serotonin. So the drug Prozac is actually trying to what? To do something like what the caffeine does. All right? Our neurons are very smart in the sense that they recycle. So once they throw out the chemical, if possible, they will send out bubbles. Remember you learned about vesicles? So it will retrieve back those unused chemicals. So it doesn't have to produce all the time. And this saves energy, makes you live longer. But what happened is, when these chemicals, right, when they get used up, it's useless. So what happened is, the drug Prozac, right, they try to stop the reuptake, the recycling process. So serotonin is stuck inside the synaptic gap for longer periods. So it's, even if they cannot use fast enough, it's still there, so it will just go on second wave, third wave of firing. So when you have bliss being fired, not just one time, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, overall the person will increase in feelings of contentment and bliss instead of depression. Okay? But too much of this is no good. Too much of this, there is a different thing. You will experience agitation. Initially, you will feel sleepy, but beyond that, you will feel easily agitated. So here is a good thing why the question from Stephanie is good, because it shows you that neurotransmitters don't only have one signaling outcome. It depends on the receptors. So when enough receptors, it gives you bliss. When there's a lot of receptors receiving it, you will think that very, very much bliss, can really relax now, so please go to sleep. And some all right, they feel that, hey, too much. Later sleep, I cannot wake up. Better feel angry. So it starts another process, make you feel agitated, to stop whatever you're doing to make yourself too blissful. Because it's not good for primitive people to be too blissful. They can die from predation. Today is a different story, but you already evolved that mechanism. Got it? So your behavior is not always your behavior. It could be changed because of the chemicals you are exposed to. In this case, it's a regulated thing. You only can get access to this through drugs. But actually, certain foods will give you higher chances of producing serotonin. For example, cheese and milk products. So that's why there's all this folk and myth saying that you should drink a glass of warm milk before you sleep. But actually, you need to drink a lot of milk. One glass is not enough. Okay? But the placebo will amplify that glass of milk. Got it? So some things are there not because they are just housewives' tale. They really have an effect, but they still need some placebo to happen, to make it really happen. So whilst we are debunking myths, we don't throw everything out like that. Some things now you know why people say certain things. Of course, unfortunately, if you rely on milk to fall asleep, I have just spoiled your show. Because now you know you need a placebo effect too. But once you know, placebo doesn't work. So you can write your complaint letter to me later, okay? Question? Any more questions about trying to understand this chapter? About how chemicals can change your behavior, how they are always a part of us making things work. As for those things I lingered, I go back to it, please put a star there. Okay? All right, we're done. Let's go for a break. I see you at 8:45. Okay. Okay. So actually the answer is not just a simple yes and no. Because those of you who cannot see the question, she's asking, when we eat too much, will we feel agitated? Does that correlate with overfeeding in something called Freud's oral phase, where babies become more aggressive if overfed? I was saying that the answer is not a straight yes and no, because it's not just a quantity of food, there is also what kind of food you are eating. Some foods are naturally more likely to create arousal, and some foods sometimes we learn that we don't like certain foods. Now, if we break it down, anybody who is overfed will feel agitated. Why? Because we have so much stomach space. When you eat, the stomach expands. All right? Now, but if it overexpands, then it will be at risk of rupturing. It's very difficult to reach that stage. But nonetheless, in order to prevent damage and hurt, all right, so it sends a signal. Now, of course, it will not tell you how much percentage is damaged. You're not a robot. So over the years, we have evolved mechanisms to display signs of rejection, strong rejection, which could be aggression, all right, or which could be just a show of agitation first. So I think the greatest contributing factor to overfeeding and feelings of agitation, if we don't consider the types of food, but you definitely have you have been overfed, is the discomfort of the stomach. All right. Moreover, we evolve agitation is just a mild form of, there's a mild form of anger there. You resist, you retaliate. Why we have evolved retaliatory behavior is that when we notice that our personal space, our safety, our survival is being encroached upon, we tend to want to fight back. Of course, there may not be enough pain to literally retaliate. So the very mild form is to show a very irritated form of discomfort, so the agitation comes in. Now, being very complex, we might then display signs of what? Not necessarily always anger, but there is some form of more active kind of upset. So not necessarily crying, in other words, it's just that the person may fidget more, all right, may be prone to complaining out loud, because this is a way of venting out. For infants, they are unable to say it in words. So what they will do is they will cry. Now, I'm not going to place so much confidence in something called Freud's oral phase. The internet has a lot of Freudian information, but so far we already feel that, in fact, all the evidence show that, first off, the traditional or original Freudian work looking at the oral phase, the anal phase, the latent phase and phallic phase, all this staging in personality, they are inaccurate. Freud himself did not provide evidence, but the lay people love that kind of descriptive talk. So even though internet was invented much later than Freud, but the lay people has been talking about this kind of information. So when the internet came about, all this information got stored and it's now available for everyone to read. But in the research, the scientific community, we don't think that Freud's description is actually accurate. All right. So when you say that, oh, because the baby is in oral stage of development, so it's more sensitive about eating, and if you give it too much, then obviously it's going to have a reaction. Like I said, I don't think it's because of the personality stage. It's simply because the child, when overfed, is uncomfortable. Its stomach is stretched out. All right. And aggressive reaction from agitation is just a consequence of that discomfort. Okay.
Okay.
Which
thank
is
you.
good, because then we have another signal to pay attention to the well-being of our children, right? Okay. Now we're going to move on. Any more question? No? Okay, I think I've answered Rebecca. Now, so far what we have covered is that we have looked at the very basics of your behavior, where it stems from the cells in your nervous system. But now, when they congregate, when they are grouped together, how do you behaviorally interact with the environment? So that brings us to the next. Oh, you want to project it? That brings us to the next chapter, which is on sensation and perception. Okay, this is what you're going to learn, but then we'll come to that later on. Before I define anything, we have some recap. You've learned this since no, you don't have this slide because I don't want you to see the question ahead of time.
Yeah.
But it's no big deal, okay? Look at the question. We're going to have a quick recap because sensation and perception was first taught in primary school, right? So, do you still remember? So, is this statement correct? Yes, no?
Normally I'll answer true lah, but after your first seems like everything.
Yeah, wow, now you're very familiar with my trick questions, right?
I think this question connect, which I wanted to ask you about this sensation and more things
Okay.
about behavior of, with due respect, the government today say that they're going to give more support to special need children. So what we have learned is there an assumption that those with special needs they don't function properly. The neuron, the pathologies and all sorts of things, like not counting the disabled. So does we include the special needs people as disabled?
Okay, first of all, why I put there not counting the disabled is because it's from primary school. You're doing a recap, right? In primary school, we never consider two groups. We just learn about basic human senses. Okay, I'll come to answer the question shortly. Let's have a vote on this first. Now, usually I can actually have people click on it. Now, the online people, you probably can. You can use the annotate button on your menu, and then you just put your chop like, okay, let me demonstrate. If I click on annotate, I will be able to put a stamp on the answer that I want. Maybe like I will smack it right here. Is it coming? No, maybe I should need to put here. Oops, bad. Oops, bad again. Bad because it's same color. Hang on, let me clear it. Yeah. So if I smack it, there, see? And of course, if you decide that it's true, then just smack it here. Online people can do the annotate button, all right? In class, then we just raise our hands. How many people think that Yes, I remember this statement. So it's true. Raise your hand. Very reluctantly, we have Louis. Oh, no.
I cannot be haunted by past experiences.
All right. Now, I do not know whether people who put near the false part is because they are wary of trick questions from me, or, all right, they have already learned that, yeah, it is more than 5 senses. Depending on how you define it, depending on who you are talking to, it's usually between 11 to 20 senses. Yes. It's not even 6 or 7. So 6 sense is nothing. Okay. What is this? This. Oh, I like the smiley faces. That's a lot of sense. Okay, I'm gonna clear the annotate now. All right. And you talk about the disabled people, right? So, yep. And turn this off. Okay, it should be back to normal now.
So the answer is
Just hang on. No, the answer is false because we have more than 5 senses. We have anywhere between 11 to 20 senses. But they can't teach you that in primary school. You kill the child. The child will have 1 sense left. Nonsense. So it's too much for children to study this, but the funny thing is they never follow up with this at secondary school anymore. Maybe certain classes, okay, with those students who study specialized topics, they do. But a lot of times when you don't go into a specific topic, if it's just general, sometimes they don't talk about this. So it also depends a bit on luck. Sometimes if your educational syllabus covers it, then good for you. So you find that out there, a lot of people will just remember it as 5 senses. And what's wrong with this? Because the other kind of senses are very difficult to talk about. For example, you have something called, you are able to know balance, all right? But balance is not like there is 1 sense organ. There are a few working together. You will need the receptors within your joints. You will need the ability to calculate your direction, the organ somewhere inside your ear. So, and then you need some parts of your brain to do this. Then you cannot pinpoint anything. So it's very difficult for children to learn this. All right? So they've simplified it, 5 senses. Disabled people, I think it's dangerous to use the word. Does that mean that they don't sense or don't think properly? The word properly is probably a bad term. Now, once upon a time, we believed that people who don't behave and don't interact with the environment like the rest of us, well, I don't know, maybe you're not like the rest of us, okay? Just ignore the judgmental part for the moment. So, if you don't interact with the world like the rest of us, you are considered as abnormal. And then they will smack you with a label, you are disabled. That is wrong. Why? Let's just look at one particular group. Autistic children, they are sometimes unable to communicate properly because they don't pay attention to face. So they overlook certain emotional cues from facial expressions. But have you heard before, or maybe even seen before, some autistic children are extremely good at maybe say playing piano or trying to tear apart a clock, and then suddenly they put it back when we can't. Once we tear apart the clock, we're stuck. Which gear goes where, right? Or they take some iPad and suddenly without any instruction, they know how to do things more advanced than you, and you find your bank balance goes 0. Something like that. So it's incorrect to say that they don't think properly. Maybe they think properly more than you do. But there are 2 groups. One group, we know for sure, the brain structure is such that there are problems with the connection. So they are unable to process even simple information. Another group is that they don't process information in the usual way. It's not that they are not normal. Maybe in the future, they are the normal. We are the obsolete ones. So the word properly is not so good. Now, how come? Because you've learned about for example, the dendrites, correct? What I didn't show you, okay, let's see if this works better. Actually, right, just now you learned that the dendrites, right, maybe there's the cell is like that. So this is the thing, and then down here there are all these things like dendrites, correct? So if we enlarge one of these, you find that the picture can look like this. So if I enlarge it, one strip can be something like that. So it connects to the neuron, the soma, the body below, right? Actually, on the dendrite itself, it's not always just a flat surface. So what happened is, it actually has something that looks like this. Maybe I draw a few and you see it. Okay, there are a lot. Okay, we're talking about hundreds of thousands of them, but I'm not going to draw everything. Online, can you? Well, okay, I think online totally cannot see it. Can? It's kind of got a lot of reflection. Oh, okay. Okay. Now, so your dendritic spines, there are bulges on it. The bulge increases the surface area for connections. See? So it can come in. So instead of only hitting a spot down here, let me use another color. Red. Okay, great, thanks. So if there's nothing, right, you find that my axon will end up something like this. I will only end up, maybe if there's no bulge, the axon will be something like that. So it will only be able to hit a spot like here. But if I have a bulge, right, I could have another one coming in towards the same place. And I will have double signaling now, because one on this side, another one on this side. And what this can mean is that it need not always be making it more sensitive. It could be one is actually asking the message to be sent forward because it's important. But it also evolves a stage where you must stop the signal. For example, if I want to hold, maybe I'm holding a party. So I've just baked a pot of casserole. I'm going to move it from the oven to the table. Now I hold it, wow, ouch, it's hot. But not so hot that I will suddenly just pull back. So what I can do is hot. But the other side says don't, or else you'll drop. So it suppresses the signal and nothing goes down. You just endure it, put there. Got it? So you don't lose your pot of casserole. So this is important by increasing surface area. But people with Down syndrome, with some form of mental retardation, and some autistic children, you find that their dendritic spine, their dendrites don't have these bulges called the dendritic spines. It's just flat. So the amount of signaling will suddenly become lesser. Okay? Meaning they cannot behave in certain ways. But to compensate for that, they may have other forms of connection that we will never have because we have all these bulges. We don't need other forms of signaling. So can you just say that just because they have no dendritic spines, we have, therefore we are better? But they form other pathways that we can never achieve. So that's why the word properly is really very, very bad. They are unique. They may not think usual, like the way we usually think. They may not be typical, but they are certainly not always abnormal. They are not always lacking in proper signaling, and they are definitely not always disabled. This statement is just simply because that's how we learned it. All right? Now, let me not say too much yet. Let me just make you sink deeper into the trap first. Okay, which monster is bigger? The front or the back? Now on way. Okay, it's always just false. All right, but No matter how you force yourself, somehow your mind tells you the one that is either you see as the one that's higher or the one that's behind is bigger, isn't it?
Yeah.
Let's remove the background. It's really the same. Why is it that your mind can be short-circuited? Does that mean that our sensation and perception are false most of the time? Actually, it is. Yeah, we can be. Otherwise, why you think the lawyers are so rich? Yeah, so quick, go take another course, right? Mm-hmm. That one, nothing. They go to court, then they have to talk about things. Does that mean that your eyes are no good? Right? When you don't see things that way, as in what it's supposed to be. Now, let's push this a bit. What if we completely short circuit your ability to see things? All right? Now, we switch out. Okay, what I will oh, by the way, the videos, right? Monday. Have you all downloaded? Okay, please go download from the Dropbox. I will remove it at the end of this Wednesday so that I can upload the next batch of videos in. I will always leave the assignment videos there, but the rest of those for you all to watch, I will take it out. So for now, we are going to watch a short clip. In the one that I give it to you, it will be a full documentary on something called prosopagnosia. So let's watch the shortened version. Obviously, I can't have you watch 1 hour over here. Oops, it's not. Wait. One requires some.
Meet Terry Sweeney, a professional.
My bad, hang on. This is not. Where did my mouse go? Yoo-hoo. Oh, it's back. I remember this one was giving a lot of problem. First, we have to push it to another screen. So, like this, then make it smaller.
Your mouth is getting tired.
Meet Terry Sweeney, a professional photographer.
Oh, it's already there. Worse.
Your eyes allow you to see the world around you. But have you ever wondered how...
I remember I have to move it to the other screen before enlarging.
You open it again?
Oh, you are able to do it? Oh, it's there. Oh, okay. Okay. Hang on. Let me enlarge it.
Your mouth is getting tired.
Meet Terry Sweeney, a professional photographer. She was a firefighter until an injury damaged part of her social brain, the circuitry she uses to recognize faces. The disorder is called prosopagnosia. For example, the person Terry has been photographing here is her mother. Now, because of her injury, Terry can't recognize any face.
Make me smile.
Not even her own mother's.
I'm really grateful you don't drink a lot of coffee when you be balanced.
In this test, Terry takes a Polaroid picture of her mother.
Terry, you just took a picture of your mother. And I want you to take a look at these and see if any of them are the picture you took or not. They may.
Now, Massachusetts General Hospital researcher Dr. Nancy Etkoff shows Terry several Polaroids with only faces showing and asks Terry to pick out her mother.
You know. Okay, if you had to guess, which looks to you the most like your mother? Just looking now, you can't tell which one of these. None of these really look like your mother to you.
No.
Okay.
If you just cover up the face and I just look at the clothes, I can tell you.
Okay, do you want me to uncover them? Okay, why don't I do that? I'll uncover them so you can see what they're wearing and other parts of the picture.
And see, that's her, because the pink and purple shirt.
The shirt. You recognize the shirt.
It's the hardest, I think, with my family, not to be able to personalize them with a face or a sense of timing. you know, it's kind of like I've lost everybody, like everyone's gone. And all that I'm really left with are facts without faces, you know?
When Terry looks at these slides of famous faces, she can't recognize them, although other cues like hairstyle prompt a guess.
Is that Madonna? Because her hair, look at her hair.
It's Marilyn Monroe.
Oh, really?
Now, what if you ask her to, can you point to my nose? Which is a facial feature, right? So she cannot recognize who I am. She cannot recognize who her mother is. But when you show her any picture or even a live person, you ask her, can you point to the eyes? Or left eye, maybe? And then can you point to the nose? Do you think she's able to do those? She's not only able to do those, she can also, all right, if you point to that part, she can actually tell you, oh, that's the nose you're pointing to. But when she looks at the whole face, it's impossible for her to recognize anything. And it's not like what you've, was it this class that I talked about, broadcast area damage? So it's not like she can understand, but cannot express it. Now, in the mind, it is just like a caricature or some kind of blank or some kind of very gross kind of thing. The moment she looks at faces, it's just not there. It's a grotesque piece of thing. But grotesque maybe it's possible to point out parts of it. Very difficult to imagine, right? Because we have never experienced these kind of things. But that's how they are like. The reason why it's happening so is because their injury knocked out a particular part of the brain called the fusiform face area. Now, I don't have a picture for it. Maybe I should have prepared it earlier on, but just in case you're wondering why, if you take out the brain and you look at it from the bottom up, so this is like the brain, your eyeball is here, so the frontal lobe is on this side, and this is the occipital lobe. The fusiform face area is the one in red. So you can Google and check, all right? Okay? And see? Okay, the picture doesn't look superb. I'm a psychologist, not an artist. Or maybe I have a disability, I didn't tell you, right? Okay? So anyway, this is where it is. Without this part, there is no way, as in this part of the brain, there is no way you can recognize faces. But you can recognize other things. So you can still go through life, you cannot do certain jobs, especially those jobs that require recognition. All right, photo taking, yeah, but then you're limited to taking anything except things with faces. And you say, what about an animal? They usually recognize another animal from certain cues. Like if it's a deer and it's a spotted deer, they know that it's a deer because of the spots. All right, but that's about it. They cannot look at the face, but then recognizing animals, you usually won't need the face, so that's okay.
So that means they cannot recognize means that is the face.
They can't tell what it
They
is.
can tell that's the face, but I don't know who is it.
Who is definitely out of the picture. What it is, then depends on, if you are focusing on one spot, then yes. If you are focusing on like, what kind of face is this? Is it an angry face, a sad face? This might be beyond them, depending on the damage, the extent of the damage.
But you said they can recognize like the eye and the nose.
Yeah, but you can't tell emotions just by looking at the eyes. So for example, in the frown, you need to look at, maybe there's a cringe down here, maybe some grimacing out at the cheeks. So you still need several parts.
But if like your eye and my eye are different, can't they recognize the difference in the two eyes?
What do you mean?
Like,
recognize the difference in the eyes?
Like his eye is very different from my eye.
Mhm.
They can point out eyes. Can they point out like Jeremy's eyes?
Yeah, so like what was shown in the video, if there is something salient, something very strongly different, like the way Madonna spotted her hair, she could tell. But if you get two people who are like from North Korea where they all have the same hairstyle, then that's impossible. Okay? Yeah, all thanks to Kim Jong-un, right? So this is what it's like. Sensation and perception. If you don't give it the basic features like some parts of the brain, it's not going to work. But we usually take it for granted that we are able to interact with the world like it's no big deal. So this condition where a person cannot recognize the face is called prosopagnosia. It's also found in individuals who survive stroke, some of them, because the stroke could have knocked out the fusiform face area, then you find that they cannot recognize their family members anymore. Okay? All right, so in case the picture is not strong enough, I can have you read a story here, but this you can read on your own. It's in your notes. So let's look at what's happening. Before that definition, sensation and perception are two different things. Sensation refers to what you can experience about changes in the environment. Usually this is because there is some form of stimulation going on. In other words, there is something making some energy changes in the environment. So you are now detecting the energy change. Maybe dimming of the lights, maybe there's a sound. So these are sensations, but they may not mean a thing. Okay, they may not make sense. You have to interpret these signals into something meaningful before you can interact. So the ability to organize and interpret the signals meaningfully is called perception. So actually we are dealing with two parts. Whenever we talk about human, how we behave in response to the world, in response to others, we are able to do stage one, detecting the energy changes. Then secondly, interpreting these energy changes in a meaningful way, which is perception, before we can start to react. So in other words, if you look at the entire thinking processes, your so-called memory formation, your solving problem, those are several stages down. First stage in information processing will be to first successfully conduct sensation and perception. All right, now a few technical details. People have tried to study this. So one of the things that they realize is that whenever you are given a new stimulus, you may or may not detect it. It could be too weak. So when they try to understand how much energy changes, for example, if this room is totally silent, how much must I turn up the volume of a sound before you start to detect it? And not to mention, different people have different sensitivities, right? So they got a bunch of people into the room. Hopefully, when there's a big bunch of people, all the differences, like personality differences, expectation differences, they got even out. Because some people will expect more, some people expect less. So placebo no longer counting, right? And then they start to turn on the volume. They want to know when is the cutoff where 50% of the people will notice a change from no sound to I'm hearing some sound. So that's how they actually map out where is the cutoff point where we are able to detect what volume. So now it makes sense that we have things such as what? 0 decibel, 10 decibels, 20 decibels. What are these? Even if you convert to some form of energy level, does that make a point? Like people will tell you, if you play the music at 40 to 60 decibels, that's like soothing. If it's at 80 decibels, it's noisy. If 120 decibels, you go deaf. It's not always according to the amount of energy discharge. It's also based on what we have found out about our ability to detect these things. Okay? So put a star there. Absolute threshold in sensation, it refers to the least amount of stimulus that 50% of the people can detect at any point in time. So ever since 120 years ago until now, we have discovered many different kinds of stimuli magnitude that will hit a so-called absolute threshold. Now, of course, with this, right, people start to ask another question. If you already are hearing a sound, for example, how much must I turn up the volume before you notice that, oh, you have just raised the volume? So the thing is, I think this part you can imagine. If you are in a room that has no sound at all, it's 0 decibel, correct? So how much must I turn up the volume? Maybe you listen intently, and then the person raise it from 0 to 30, and suddenly you realize, aha, you're playing something. So now you know you're at 30 decibels, you hear something, correct? So let's repeat that same sound. So maybe it's a sound that goes dee like that, right? Now we raise the volume. So you go into another room. This time around, instead of starting at 0, the sound is already there. Maybe the sound is at 40 decibels. Now remember just now was 0 to 30, you start to notice it, right? So the question is, does that mean that 40, I raise it another 30 to 70, then you will notice that I have turned up the volume. So they are not only interested in the absolute threshold, what is the minimum amount before you hear it, they are also interested in how much must a change be before it's detected. All right? So this part is a bit more troublesome. Why? Because apparently, right, it all depends on where you start off. If you start off at 0 decibels, maybe, okay, let's make the number, okay, let me draw it out in a graph, you better, it's easier for you to understand. Suppose, right, I start off at, so this is the graph, then the y-axis represents how loud things can be, that is decibels. Now, if I first start out at, let's say, 10 decibels, and I need only to raise it by another 10 decibels, and you will notice it. So let's draw this double the size. So you begin to notice it. I say, I know, got a difference. But when you come into the room that it's already very noisy, so let's say it's 3 times the size. Okay, so it's in another room, so let's mark it differently. Although it's a 10 decibel increase before you notice it, apparently it's not going to be another 10. It could be a lot more. So your starting point determines where the end point is going to be. So that means, right, since we have various kinds of starting point, it's not going to be a standard thing. It's not like you 0 and then for sure, for most people, 30 decibels is where you're going to hear it. Instead now, there's a lot of variation to this. Where does this thing apply? Think TV. Your TV, you can adjust the volume, right? So the thing is, in physics, it's easy. You want the volume to increase, you just put in more current into the solenoid, so it will blast out the sound. And what you can do, so that device that blasts out the sound, that speaker has a device called a solenoid inside. Okay, doesn't matter what it is. Just know that it's a component that will blast out the sound. So when you want to increase, for machines, it's easy. It's a linear curve. You raise 10, you put in 10, let's say 0.1 ampere, you're going to get this much sound. You put in 0.2 ampere, you're going to get that much sound. But humans are different. Initially, when you first tune up the volume, it's a little bit of current, you will hear it. But later on, you need to put in more current. So for simplicity, they usually mark like 0 to 10 or evenly spaced out. But the real mechanics of it is that it's not evenly spaced out. They have to calculate how much current is required to produce the next level where you really can hear it. Okay? Otherwise, a lot of things will be very unfriendly to use. Can you imagine you have to learn logarithmic scale before you use any devices? So you cannot do anything until you reach secondary school. Then you phase out already. All right? So these are the discoveries. Of course, in ancient past, people don't have knowledge of this, but they have lesser tools to use. And it is not something unknown to them. If you go, let's say Greece, right? Athens, you go and see all those ancient temples. When you look at some ancient temple, you find that the pillars, especially those temples where the front wall is still there or they restored it. So there are all these huge pillars supporting maybe a beam across their temples, right? Now you look at it from afar, you find that, wow, perfect 90 degrees symmetry, wow, gigantic thing there, you take photo, happy. But if you go closer, you realize that it's not built, the horizontal beam is not horizontal. It's actually curved. But because of interaction with the vertical lines, it created an illusion. So the ancient people noticed this. They may or may not have worked out the mathematics, but they will adjust it so that although there's interference, like just now you saw some of the things, right? That optical illusion, yeah, they cancel that out. And ancient people are not stupid. When they do, they have certain mathematics. For example, in China, in Persia, when they are trying to build an amphitheater, and even in Roman times also they have it. In an amphitheater, they actually have a formula already to calculate how far they should put the curve and how far they should put the audience stand so that they can get the loudest of the sound. It's just that it was not standardized across the world, so various scholars use different ways to calculate, but today we have standardized it. Yeah, in a way, we have reinvented the wheel, but now it's very standard. Everywhere you go, things can be manufactured more easily following a certain standard. So these standards are not produced by engineers. They were first discovered by psychologists looking into something called psychophysics, sensation and perception. All right? Now, let's look at how far we can push your sensation and perception. All right? Now, let's look at this. I want to show you a video. And this video, right? Okay. There is a question at the beginning of the video. Okay? Or maybe, oh, no. The question comes later. But okay, pay attention to the video. The question will pop up later. All right? And then this, I want to highlight something about sensation and perception. Let's take a look. Yeah, you see it.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe.
Let's start it again, right?
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away.
That's right, madam.
It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
Did you?
I saw two.
You saw two? How many of you saw 21? Okay, let's watch.
And action. Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
Why, I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
Okay? How come you all didn't notice it? Well, neither did I when I first watched this. What happened to your sensation and perception? Are you still going to trust it? So we know that sensation and perception, it doesn't happen like that. They require certain components. You may have your brain intact to receive signals in terms of sounds, in terms of sight, or any other kind of like maybe smell, touch. But it doesn't mean that just because all these things are functioning and you will actually get the real picture. Obviously, people have made changes, but we are blind to them. All right? So this thing is called attentional blindness. They have various ways of doing this. Like sometimes they even do it in other TV programs. So there was another, the TV show called Get. So sometimes they have this, maybe someone who's asking for direction. Then they have this wooden board move past and then suddenly a person will change, right? Some people notice that they are talking to another person, although they don't know how come it has switched. Some people literally just continue and like as if there's nothing that has changed. All right. Now, the key here is, it's literally attention. This one. Technically, this refers to a particular function that is created by your brain and your mind. Attention, at the biological level, it's actually, I wanted to use the word triggered, but it's not always just triggering, it's also adjusted, so maybe moderated. Remember just now you learned the term acetylcholine? Now, when your acetylcholine is high, it will cause some parts of your brain to encode information very, very quickly. When it's able to do that, you will be able to pick up more details. You might notice some of the changes. At the same time, if your acetylcholine is actually at max level, you not only can read longer or pay attention to the task longer, and when you are able to pay specific attention to changes, to minute changes, that's when they say, oh, good, you are concentrating, correct? So increasing acetylcholine allows you to increase your so-called attention span and your focus, and that allows you to really learn information. Without which, you can be reading, and then after that you find that it's not properly encoded, so the next day you have to reread something. So it's a chore when our acetylcholine is down, and we have to do revision. That's a chore, okay? Otherwise, can you imagine you just read one time and it goes in forever? Easy. So there's something called attention. We'll come back to it later. Last bit is, sensation and perception is really a thing about what? Converting the signals that you detect into something that is meaningful. In this case, right, more likely something that is electrical. The outside world is full of what? Light, sounds, various kinds of energies. But there can only be one type of energy existing within you for interaction purposes. That's electrical. Remember your action potential in your cells? So it's a matter of converting some of this sensation into something that can be used and can be registered or stored. And over time, you find that you may lower your attention span on something. That's because you have adapted. All right? Now, don't worry about this. This is just for comprehensiveness. It's put there. All right? I don't need you to put a star on this. And it will also appear if you actually read the textbook. Now, let's go into more of it. This part, I'm not going to emphasize too much. What is light? We can see light. Well, light is really a form of radiation. Although we have evolved so that the light, the visible light itself, is not dangerous. Okay, I mean, as long as it's not too bright, it doesn't hurt your eyes, it's not dangerous. But it is really a form of electromagnetic energy. And here, if you convert it into physics terms, this is something called a wavelength. That means the energy, all right, it will vibrate, and it vibrates a certain number of times per second. So the number of vibrations, the faster it vibrates, the shorter the gap in between the fluctuating energy. Okay, so this is physics, no big deal. To put it into context, the entire spectrum of the energy is very long, very huge. This is not even according to scale. Our ability to detect this electromagnetic radiation in the environment is limited to only a small part. Some insects and animals, they have evolved better visual ability to process these kind of energies. For example, how is it that a mosquito can always find you and bite you? Because the mosquito not only can see visible light, it's also able to see infrared, which is heat. So now, to use your skin to detect heat, you need to be very close to the source, or the source has to be very hot, because these are very poor sensitivity to heat. On the other hand, right, if you can see heat, then you can see it from very far. So for the mosquito, it has no problem seeing you from hundreds of meters away. All right, and then you will just follow. Of course, it follows your scent, your amount of carbon dioxide you give out, blah blah blah, a lot of things lah. But this is one of those things, it's able to see in the dark. Okay?
Sorry, Mr. Lam, can I ask you a stupid question? You said this is how our eyesight perceive light and don't see up to this. Is it our eyes or is it how our brain can process what we're seeing?
Your eyes can only accept the energies at this range. Okay. And your brain will interpret, because it's only fed this amount of energies within this range, so it's only able to interpret and see this range. In other words, if I were to have maybe put you in a starship, send you to another planet, the planet can have other kinds of composition, no more just oxygen, but if there is sunlight hitting the planet and it reflects off any light, you will only see it in the color of the rainbow. You will never be able to see it beyond the 7 rainbow colors. Because your eyes, the cells in your eyes are only able to detect this particular range, and your brain can interpret only this range, and of course it doesn't tell you the numbers because you're not a machine. Instead, it tells you in the format of a color. So that's it. We cannot see beyond what we are genetically supposed to see. Okay? But keep in mind, it's actually beyond this. There are humans who have evolved, they have mutated a bit beyond, not many of them. So, for example, there's this, what's his name? Sorry, often I cannot recall his name, but there's a boy in China who can see in the dark just like cats. But because of the mutation, some people say it's defect. Of course, bright light hurts him more than us, but he also has a layer of reflective cells at the back of his eyes. But it's not like cats where you actually see green eyes. His eyes, he's a Chinese, but he looks, but his eyes are like have a nice bluish tint, like the Caucasians, blue iris. Yeah. I will come to that shortly for the colorblind question. Okay. And then there are people who, they close their eyes and yet they can still see. This is the part that is a mystery. We still haven't figured out how they are able to do that. Apparently, it seems like some parts of the brain, if you heighten it enough, it's able to use some other ways to detect the energy. All right. So, but these are very few people. Maybe more and more of them will pop up as we continue to evolve. Right now, it's just a few of them. Okay. So to go back to that question, if you rely on just your eyesight, these are the only colors you can see, nothing beyond. Because your brain and your retinal cells will limit you. When talking about retinal cells, now we come to someone who asked a question. What was the question? Okay, color blindness, right? What happens to people with color blindness? Now, I'd like you to answer that, right? Let's do a quick one. Look at this part here. Now, this is a magnification of what's happening in your eye. So I'm sure all of you are quite acquainted with this structure. We learned it in secondary school. And the thing is, most people can remember retina is at the back of the eye. What most people didn't realize is that actually the retina is very huge. It covers about 2/3 of your entire back of the eye. It's not like on the picture where this is one small spot. So meaning although this is the part where the light will focus on over here, everywhere at the back here are all your retina. Now, but this particular cell that's called the cone cells, they are only located at where this part here is. Why is this part? Now, it's not so clear on this picture, but let's say my mouse traces the light path. So the pathway of the light is straight, it goes through the lenses, it gets focused on somewhere at the back, and it's focused onto this spot. Got it so far? Light travels in a straight line, right? So it's focused on here, on here. And cone cells are all located around here. There are about 100 million cells in each eye, only about 7 million cone cells, and they are all located here. The rest are other cells. Now, what about this? Cone cells, they evolve in 3 types. Meaning, what happens is this cell, right? It contains certain biochemicals. Again, but we are not going to talk about what they are. It's beyond the syllabus. But there are actually 3 basic types of biochemicals. Depending on the light energy level, the wavelength, they will cause a reaction with this chemical. So for light waves, there are having a longer wavelength, because there's like more heat embedded within this electromagnetic energy. It will cause the chemical that's associated with red color to become reactive. For light that is more it's very low in bed. How long more do we have? Oh, okay, we're almost ending now. Don't worry. I think the bed will last. Okay? Otherwise, it's bad. Okay? All right, now, so I don't want to go too much details about this because this is anatomy and physiology. All right, we want to come back to the behavior of this later on. But the foundation is that we have certain cells and energetic cells, right? Which means it's actually the bluish color that you see, bluish, purplish. There's another cell. So total, right, we have 3 types. The ability to see heat kind of light source, red. Ability to see energetic light waves, which is bluish, purplish. So blue cone cells. And finally, green cone cells, somewhere in the middle. So you can detect extreme ends plus somewhere in the middle. It is, and then the number of all these cells concentration. So one particular color, right? That means the light color, hitting on your retina may cause, for example, 20% of the red to fire off and 60% of the blue to fire off. So combining it, you have a new experience. You don't see red, you don't see blue, you see purple. Got it? So that's So tomorrow's class also, I ask a lot of questions. I always have to rush to finish. Done? Okay. All right. So as I was saying, you have 3 types of cone cells. They are the ones responsible for, there are 3 reasons why you can see color. This is the first reason. You can only see this range of colors because of these 3 cells. You knock them out, you get what? If you knock all 3 out, you won't go blind. You get color blindness. You will now only be able to see black, white, or gray. So that answers, I don't know whose question it was, okay? Huh? YJ. So YJ was asking about color blindness. If you want pure, perfect color blindness, knock out all 3. How to do that? It's usually not by injury, because you can't just poke at specific parts of at tiny microscopic parts of the eye. So what's happening is that they are born with a genetic flaw. These people were never born with cone cells. But it's very, very rare. Out of all the people with color blindness, only about 5% have pure color blindness. The rest are usually missing either the blue type, or missing the red type, or missing a green type. So we roughly have about 70% missing one type of cone cells, and about 25% missing 2, and finally less than 5% missing all 3. Okay? So what about those people with like 1 or 2 less? It's like you seeing photographs that has a filter on. So they are unable to tell different colors. So if for example, I have a red filter on because I don't have the blue and the green cells, then what happens is when I see something that is red, I will see red. When I see something that's yellow, it's light red. When I see something that's blue, it's just black color. Okay? So that's how it goes. Think of filter. Don't know, just Google filtered photographs and you will experience what they experience. Now, the other thing is, I mentioned, what about the rest of the eye? Okay, I finish this structure, then we can talk about behavior now. The rest are filled with this cell. Let me point to you. Rod cells. Everywhere in your eye, these cells, rod cells, they allow you to see black, white, of course the mixture, gray, and also detect brightness. So what is happening is that all these things, when they work, and they don't work all the time. Now, you look at this room, and those of you at home, right, I'm sure your light is on. The image is very clear. That means the resolution is high, correct? But when you turn off, sometimes you do that, and I mean, you wake up in the middle of the night, maybe you're going to the toilet, you don't want to turn on the lights. But you notice all the images, even if you put on your specs, let's say you have eyesight problem, you put on your specs, the image still looks blurrish, especially the silhouette's edge, they are blurrish. In other words, in today's terms, we call it low resolution picture, correct? The reason is because, if you look at here, if you look at this, these ganglion cells are actually your first layer of brain cells. It's the same as almost like your CNS. What they do is, they collect information from individual cones and rod cells, and then they transmit it to the brain for further processing. But they are the first layer of processing, very much like your spinal cord. Now what they do is, their connections to the cone cells are very specific one. You see this green color thing, these are like the bridges. So what happens is, one cone cell will always have one bridge, and it will connect to only one ganglion cell. No more, no less. But rod cells, because there are so many more of them, so we are looking at 93 million in each eyeball. There is not enough ganglions to go around. So as much as 100 rod cells can be connected to one ganglion cell. So what is happening is that the ganglion cannot have high resolution because it's not one-to-one communication. So when a few is speaking, the ganglion cell may think, I think too low, better shut up. Don't send the signal back. So when it's not sent back, your brain cannot process, it becomes a low resolution picture. But rod cells make up for what? For its sensitivity. You notice you can see still when the lighting is low. When the lighting is low, your cone cells are not activated. That's why you don't see color. You only see shades of black, gray, probably no white because there's no light. So that's how you work. You have two groups. One, the sensitive group, but they have limited information to give in terms of quality. Then there is another group which could give very high quality information in terms of color, in terms of resolution, but they cannot function in very dark places. Okay? Now, one of the things is, now this question I'll just pose to guys. How did they teach us to shoot? If you are with the army instead of the police, how did they teach us to shoot in the night? Do you look at your target to shoot? Or do you, so suppose I'm firing a rifle in the night, and my target is this camera. Will I be looking at the camera, at least the silhouette of it, to fire? Or will I be looking elsewhere? Nope. It's actually looking elsewhere. Yeah, some of you still remember. We do not look directly at the target. We look slightly, any side of it, depending on where you are familiar with. Because you want the light to what? Remember, light travels in a straight line? If you look directly, the light will travel in a straight line and hit all the cone cells which are not working in the night. But if you look slightly slanted, it will hit your rod cells, and now you can still detect a bit of movement, or you will see a bit darker silhouette. That's probably where your target is. And then you make a bit of adjustment when you shoot, of course. Right? So that's how people are trained. It's, you don't always stare at the target. Okay? So when they have finally understood these kind of things, then one of those areas of changes is in terms of warfare. Ancient people don't have knowledge of this, they just charge, or they shoot arrow or shoot. But now you don't look directly to shoot. Got it? So that's how behaviors get modified when new information comes in. Now, I'd like you to put a star on this structure. Why? Not for the physiology, but because this is important in the sense that it helps us deal with colors. So your behavior associated with color differentiation, it's all because of this. Your behavior associated with good visual acuity, it's not simply because your lenses are working, but because all these cone cells are helping to give you a resolute picture.
But for blind people, is this part not working, or is it?
Now, then it depends. For people who are blind, first you have to look at whether it's a superficial blindness. So if it's superficial structure that got hit, it could be because the lenses are gone. For example, people with cataract, the lenses are all opacified, cannot see. Then we are looking at maybe it's a structure deeper, so maybe there's too much pressure. Now this part, right, in order to buffer, is filled with a gelatinous kind of medium. But if fluid accumulates here, it crushes the retina, so then you lose your retinal cells, you can't see. If instead, right, you have, let's say you are involved in the accident and there was whiplash, and then this whiplash is strong enough to tear the optic nerve. So where did the optic nerve come from? You remember your ganglion cells? The ganglion cells have axons, right? Because they are like your neurons. There is an axon. Remember the axon is actually a structure that sends signals back to somewhere. So one cell is nothing but a lot of them combining all their axons becomes one thick strip known as your optic nerve. If there's shearing, meaning a tear in the optic nerve, you can't see. But the good news is, with all these problems, you probably will retain your imagination. So even though you can't see, all right, but you say, okay, I love you, blah, blah, blah. You're going to tell the caregiver, and then you touch the face, and oh, so it's you, my dear, blah, 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 blah. But if you fall on the back of your head and it hurts the occipital lobe, then even though there's nothing wrong with any of these things I mentioned, you cannot see anything. Your world will literally become totally dark. You cannot imagine because there's no way you can visualize internally, externally. You touch the face, you will never know who it is. Okay? I mean, sometimes they compensate. Eventually they touch, they notice the bumps. They cannot figure out the face. Or at least they cannot imagine the face, but they can figure out that, there's a mole here. It has to be something very prominent. Or they notice that Like most of us Asians, we have South Asians, we have a flatter nose. But maybe your relative has a higher nose bridge, and then they touch, oh, you are so and so. Because of a prominent feature, not because they can touch the face and imagine who it is. So blindness has varying degrees. The most fearful type is when there's a damage to occipital lobe, very difficult to help them. So those people I'm doing rehab with, if they have occipital lobe damage, I will smack. Don't know much. There's nothing much I can do. Okay, all the compensatory techniques cannot work. All right, so this is a nutshell of all those things. So put a star here for, all right, because these are amacrine cells are moderator cells, not so important. So just remember roughly this is the thing. All right, there are cone cells, rod cells, and the ganglion cells that are important. And here we write it out. Okay, let me sum it up. What's the big deal about vision? When I sum it up, you might as well do the recap. Cone cells. Cone cells, what are some of the good features about it? No, that's the rod cells. Cone cells can see color. Very clear picture, right? Highly resolute picture. So two things. So see color, highly resolute picture. What about rod cells? What are the advantages? Well, that's, most people don't see that as an advantage. It is sensitive to light. It helps you see in the dark. Okay? And there's a lot of them. So a little bit of damage, it's okay. You probably won't lose your sight. But if the damage is at the very concentrated area known as the macula or the fovea. What is macula and fovea? And sometimes people get confused about this. So that spot near the center part of your eye, that region is called the macula. All right, so you have your retina, and then you have, I'm drawing it deliberately bigger so you can see. So sometimes they tell you, oh, got macular degeneration. It's really the big area behind. But there is one spot within the macula, a bit off center, that is very, then there's a dent there. So if you actually cut it open, you see that it actually indents into that. This spot is the fovea. So now you won't become lost after reading. So this spot, there's a dent. This is also where light ray will exactly be focused onto this point. Okay? But physiology is not so important. Just in case you read and you get lost, why are there two terms when I only see it in the lecture? That's the reason. I just want you to remember there are cones, rods, they are different. Okay? And the ganglion cells, because of their connections, that's why we see pictures that are clear or not so clear. Can you train your eye to superordinary extent? Yes. All right? But it's not commonly done because it takes a long time. For example, people who are like me, I have about 400 to 500 degrees of short-sightedness, myopia. If I take about 1 year, it's possible for me to be without specs and still see clearly again. The training wouldn't reverse the damage to the eyeball. All right, that's why, because of elongation, that's why there's short-sightedness. But it's possible to retrain the lens. And the research in this area is not very extensive, so a lot of experts still don't believe it. And optometrists, of course, will tell you it's not there. But there are sufficient number of cases showing that it is possible. The other problem is it takes so long to train, people just don't do it. Okay, you really need, can you imagine in 1 whole year, you are basically not wearing your specs most of the time. Because you have to, it's almost like going to the gym. So you are going to the eye gym. But if you ask me not to wear my specs, I can't work, right? Or especially those people dealing with what, very tiny parts, assembly plant lines, where they have to look carefully, or surgeons, how to cut, cannot cut. So these techniques don't become famous, even though they are there. Yeah, let me pull the mouse back. Yeah. So this was where we are. There's something called blind spot. Blind spot is no big deal. It is just a spot where your optic nerve, all the axons combine, and this is the spot where they send the information back from retina back to the occipital lobe. So this is blind spot. You can't see it because the brain is the best photoshopper in the world. By right, when images following light hits this spot, remember fovea is slightly higher. It hits this spot, you wouldn't be able to process it because when it hits this spot, this is where, like I say, all the axons will merge at this point and then send back as optic nerve. This part actually has no, because of all the axons combining at this place, which takes up space, and quite a big space actually. So this part has no cone cells, no rod cells. It has to make way for the axons. But when there's no cones, no rods, any light that falls onto here, you can't see it. Your brain will interpret it. If you force this to come out, it will be a white color patch. So how you can trick yourself to see this is go to this, well, you can use this link if it's still there to watch the thing, or you can Google, all right, go Google, click in blind spots, how to see blind spots, and then they'll probably have this image that there's a cross and a dot, and you're supposed to do something like close one eye, and focus. Once you move a little bit, you'll find that suddenly the black dot will disappear because it hits the white patch. Okay? Yeah. But under normal circumstances, when you don't trick your eye, your brain will cover up. It will, you see, your eyeball is not always, to you consciously, it's just focusing on here. We have evolved ways to actually every 0.2, 0.3 seconds, your eyeball is actually focusing elsewhere. So, if, for example, I'm looking at this, I only think that I'm focusing on this, but my eyeball is just slightly moving everywhere. But it does retain information of this, so the brain Photoshop and put everything together for you to see the entire room. So if this light comes in here, because I'm focusing on this eye, I see it. But when it comes in from here, I might hit the blind spot. So it's a white patch. But instead of superimposing, the brain has evolved to learn that the white patch is an area of no signal. So it will take the information from here and smack it over the other side. Then what about people with one eye? So they are pirates, right? Well, one eye patched up. But remember, the eye is actually moving very quickly without your sensation about it. So as it captures various places, the brain further learns that never mind, one eye, never mind, I'll just take the information and smack it in still. So you still will have something that will superimpose onto the blind spot. You always will see something. Okay? It's just a matter of more work or less work from the brain. Okay, the rest not so important. This part, you go home and play with it. It's in your notes. If not, come back next week, I will explain. All right? For this particular picture, what you need to do at home is that you focus on this dot. Go prepare a place where you can stare at later, like 30 seconds to 1 minute later. But this place that you stare at should be white. So you either look at a blank A4 paper, or if you have a large whitewashed wall at home, then use the wall. Look at this, it has to be in this color. Look at the dot, focus looking at the center black dot for somewhere between 30 seconds to 60 seconds. Then look at a white, something that's white. And then after that, right? After that, you'll be surprised for a while and then wait for me to explain next week. Okay? Question? All right then. You've done it already? Yeah. But there's no American flag here. Why? Oh, but you're not on next week, right? Somebody else is doing it. Okay, then you check out on you. There's somebody? Oh, they don't know? That's it, done. People online, I'll see you all next week.